So we're back in our little makeshift laboratory, and I've got some 2O here. So this is a section of abdominal skin that came off of a revision tummy tuck. So we can see on this skin there's a scar there that was part of the excision. Here's the matching scar here. So these two bits of skin used to be together. So we're going to get into sewing that up. In general surgery and a lot of plastic surgeries, that's the way it is. You're suturing skin that used to be together back together. So this is all of the skin and soft tissue from the abdominal wall. So this deep side here was up against the abdominal musculature. So if we imagine that the blue towel is the abdominal muscle, we want to get the first layer of scarpus fascia and close it. So if we pull this back, you can see a different nature of the fat. The deep fat and the superficial fat is separated by a little fascial layer here. And it's about halfway through. So I'm going to, with a 2O suture, just catch the same layer on both sides. And I'm using my instrument to place this because I want to save suture material. If I hand tie, I'm tying to a longer piece than this. This way, in tying this, I am tying a short piece. I'll get more sutures out of my suture material, and it's good for utilization. So Vicryl is a braided soft suture material. I'm going to cut this with my instrument. This is a Olsen Hager needle holder. So after I've done tying my knots, I lift up both sides and I cut the knot off with a small tail. And then, without moving my hands too much, I regrasp the needle in the 2/3 in front, 1/3 behind pattern. This is a little pro tip to get a good look at this. Sometimes I use the back of my needle as a retractor, and I'll pull the tissue back so I can see to grasp. And then I suture what I've grasped on the first side. On the second side, generally I'll lightly lift up on the skin. So on the first side, I never even lifted up on the skin. So we're in the same layer on the second side. If you catch a lot of fat in this suture, you may cause some fat necrosis, and that wouldn't be good because that will liquefy and become a nidus for infection. So I'll pull this through. This is a second knot that's next to the first, and I'm going to similarly tie this with my instrument. So I'm going over the suture and then pulling it toward me, under the suture, and pull the end away from me. Over, under. And then if I wanted to cut this with a scissor, if I didn't have this cutting style needle holder, I would clamp down on the suture thread, lift both sides up with my non-dominant hand, and then have either pause for someone to cut for me or I would cut. So you can see it's pretty easy to match these levels up because this two bits of skin and tissue used to be together. And it's easier to close things that used to be together because your skin is changing thickness and its nature over the course of the body. When you cut out a big hunk of somebody and you're sewing two things that didn't used to be together, you have to do your suturing in such a way that you're thoughtful about getting the heights to match. So I'm over, under. So this is for square flat knots, over, under. You'll sometimes see us being fast and we'll just go over, we'll pull towards us, under, still pull towards us, over, still pull towards us. So that would be square but not flat. And you would do that because you're suturing in tight quarters, that's next to other people suturing, and you can't be hogging the patient. So we've got deep sutures and the knots are facing up, meaning that the suture goes in my right side here and comes out the left side. So the loop of the suture is down low, the knot is at the top. Now the next layer of closure would be a monocryl, which is a monofilament absorbable material. The other material, Vicryl, is braided. So here we're grasping the dermis and we're just trying to get dermis in an upward pass. We don't want to come out the epidermis, the skin proper. And if you'll notice this, I grasp this with my platform aided forceps, and I just pull it through enough to re-grasp it with the needle holder in the right, at the right layer, at the right level, in position ready to sew. An advantage of that, it's a little bit of a speed move. If you have to stop every time and grasp it with your fingers and grab it, it's extra moves. And also just the process of grasping it with your fingers, you may put a hole in your glove. On the second side, I like to grasp the dermis and just suture down through the dermis without ever grasping the skin surface. So the loop of this suture is at the surface. The knot ends up, because I went up on my left and down on my right, the knot ends up pointing down. The advantage of that is the knot ends are not trying to erode out the wound. Normally you don't have to hold down on the patient like this, but these light specimens will come up off the table. So you can see that that's a deep dermal suture, and that's approximating things nicely, waiting for the next layer. So I'll cut this with my instrument. Just get a little loose piece here. And we'll do another one of those in case you missed anything. So we're grasping it at the 1/3, 2/3. We're going up on the left side. You don't want to catch fat here, just dermis. Grasp it in sewing position. Grasp only dermis and go down on the second side. And you want to get 2 bites of equal depth and equal girth. Oops, I pulled it all the way through. Problem with doing this in a prep area with not adequate lighting. Up. I wasn't loving that anyway. If you do a suture you don't love, work around it. You do other sutures in the area. Let it stay there as a tack, a temporary tack, and then go back and replace it at the appropriate time. So I'm grasping dermis. I'm going down through dermis, pulling it through. See if I can avoid pulling it right out of the specimen. So loop. And that approximates very nicely. It almost looks like no other closure is necessary, but it is. So the next layer, typically on a body case, is subcuticular, which is just horizontal bites through the tissue, which we can practice anytime. Something cooler to see is more, well, what are the other closures? So there's a simple interrupted, and even though it's simple, it's easy to screw up. Now this needle's a bit big for this, but because I'm palmed to my instrument, I can roll the needle way this way and get a definite vertical entry wound straight through the dermis. Then on the second side, I grasp the same depth of dermis and I come straight up through the dermis on the second side. So it's simple, but it's easy to mess up. It's a simple interrupted suture. So the suture's going across the wound, and I lay it down flat. See how it's not kinked? It's flat. It's under no tension, but if it had a little tension, if you lock both sides of the suture off to one side, it won't slip. And then you could do your second throw, third throw, fourth throw. This is proline. Proline's slippery stuff, requires a lot of knots. You might do 6 or 8 throws per interrupted suture. So the knots should be left hooked off to the side here, and you leave them with a little tail on them so that you can take it out with a little handle. Now if we wanted to do a vertical mattress, I'm going to load this needle up backhanded, and I'm going to go through with a wider bite than you would do on a simple. And I'm going to grasp the needle. And here's another little thing. I want to avoid handling with my fingers if I can. I could just use the skin to turn me around and grasp it in the forehanded position without ever actually touching the needle with my fingers, my gloved hand. So right over the top of this deep bite, I want to catch just epidermis and nothing much more going back. So I want to stay very superficial in the dermis. Oops, their skin is very tough. Now you'll notice that my entry and my exit are on the same side of the wound, And I left a little room in between. There's about 2.5 millimeters between them, because someone's going to have to get their scissor tip in there to cut this stitch. If this exit is right on top of my entry, you're going to end up cutting both pieces when you're trying to take out the suture, and that's not advantageous. So as we tie this knot down, you're going to notice what it does to the skin edges. The skin edges become everted. They're slightly standing up, you know, in comparison to the simple that's right nearby, which stays completely flat. So why would you want eversion? Well, it maximizes the amount of dermis you have interacting with the dermis on the other side. It's a very good tension reducing suture. And some incision locations almost always indent as they heal. The shoulder, the round of the shoulder is a good example. So you want to sew in certain areas with an everting closure, because you know that you're going to take your sutures out. The wound will flatten out almost within hours or days, and it's more likely to heal not indented if you do it that way. Now her skin is a little, I'll have to do the subcuticular example with some skin that's on a patient, because if I tried to pull this through subcuticular, as tough as this skin is, it's just going to make me look awkward, and you know, because it's awkward. But you can see that this is a good repair. I'm pulling on the skin pretty hard. Nothing's breaking down or ripping, and it's a good strong closure. And it's closed, if you look under here, all the way to that deep layer is approximated nicely. So that maintains this thickness below the incision, and it's less likely that the entire abdominal incision will become an indented scar from lack of soft tissue beneath, because we did that first scarpa's fascia layer. So those are several techniques. That's a vertical mattress. We did the deep dermal suture, and we did a scarpa's fascia suture with Vicryl. More to come. Always throw away your sharps.